Why does this not surprise me? Fewer than 1% of papers in scientific journals follow the scientific method. I'm going to come back to this article here. I just want to start with this meme here. The scientific method then and now. Then, observe natural phenomenon. Formulate a hypothesis. Test the hypothesis via rigorous experimentation. Establish theory based upon repeated validation of results. Modify hypothesis and keep going until you get solid data. Now, this is the scientific method now. Generate theory based upon government grants or political motivations or biases or agendas. Then carefully craft experiments to prove theory is valid. Then write algorithms to automatically adjust data to meet government expectations. Publish papers while renaming theory a hypothesis and pretend you use the scientific method. Hide data and refuse to honor freedom of information requests. Pillory real scientists and claim the science is settled. This is so true. Okay, so I just read this one. I'm going to come back and read this one. Fewer than 1% of papers in scientific journals follow the scientific method. Here's some other recent articles. Believe it or not, most published research findings are probably false. Scientific American, an epidemic of false claims, competition, and conflicts of interest distort too many medical findings. This is from like 6 years ago. PLOS Medicine, why most published research findings are false. This is from 11 years ago, an essay. Many scientific truths are in fact false. 6 reasons why most scientific research is fake, false, or fraudulent. And big science is broken. So I'll leave all the links to this in the description. I'm just going to read one article here. You can check out the rest below. All right. Fewer than 1% of papers published in scientific journals follow the scientific method, according to research by Wharton School professor and forecasting expert J. Scott Armstrong. Professor Armstrong, who co-founded the peer-reviewed Journal of Forecasting in 1982 and the International Journal of Forecasting in 1985, made the claim in a presentation about what he considers to be alarmism from forecasters over man-made climate change. We also go through journals and rate how well they conform to the scientific method. I used to think that maybe 10% of papers in my field were maybe useful. Now it looks like maybe 1/10 of 1% follow the scientific method, said Armstrong in his presentation, which can be watched in full below. People just don't do it. I'll leave it. You can check this out in the link in the description. Armstrong defined 8 criteria for compliance with the scientific method, including full disclosure of methods, data, and other reliable information, conclusions that are consistent with the evidence, valid and simple methods, and valid and reliable data. So I'll go over these here. A criteria for compliance with science. 8 well-established criteria for judging whether a paper complies with the scientific method for policy making based on definitions of science over the ages are: its objective, tests multiple reasonable hypotheses; useful findings, effect size is important for decision making; full disclosure of methods, data, and other relevant information; comprehensive review of prior knowledge; valid and reliable data; valid and simple methods; experimental evidence provided; conclusions consistent with the evidence. According to Armstrong, very little of the forecasting and climate change debate adheres to these criteria. For example, for disclosure, we were working on polar bear population forecasts, and we were asked to review the government's polar bear forecast. We asked, could you send us the data? And they said no. So we had to do it without knowing what the data were. According to Armstrong, forecasts from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, violate all 8 criteria. Why is all this happening? Nobody asks them, said Armstrong, who says that people who submit papers to journals are not required to follow the scientific method. You send something to a journal, and they don't tell you what you have to do. They don't say, here's what science is, and here's how to do it. Do researchers mostly comply with science? No. Only a fraction of 1% of papers published in scientific journals follow the scientific method. Why? No one asked them to. Worse, they were rewarded for unscientific work, including commissioned research, especially grants from government, advocacy, complex writing, using complex, invalid, and irrelevant techniques, citations regardless of whether the work complies with science, mass media coverage regardless of scientific content. Digging deeper into their motivations, Armstrong pointed to the wealth of incentives for publishing papers with politically convenient rather than scientific conclusions. They are rewarded for doing non-scientific research. One of my favorite examples is testing statistical significance. That's invalid. It's been over 100 years we've been fighting the fight against that. Even its inventor thought it wasn't going to amount to anything. You can be rewarded then for following an invalid method. They cheat. If you don't get statistically significant results, then you throw out variables, add variables, and eventually you get what you want. My big thing is advocacy. People are asked to come up with certain answers, and in our whole field, That's been a general movement ever since I've been here. And it just gets worse every year, and the reason is funded research. I've gone through my whole career with lots of publications, and I've never gotten a research grant, and I'm proud of that now. Armstrong concluded his talk by arguing that scientific evidence should be required for all climate regulations. So this is just one aspect of the climate. You know, with the vaccines, there's big conflict of interest with the pharmaceutical drugs, all kinds of stuff. You know, with FDA and GMOs like Monsanto, like it's just so corrupt, and there's so much political agendas going on, financial agendas for stock prices. It's just so corrupt. So this is just one aspect of it. I just thought you guys should be aware of that. Don't ever trust every study you hear. One week, one study comes out and says this. A month later, another one comes out and says the opposite. Do your own research and try to look at all the different angles and come to your own conclusions. What is there? A meme. I don't have it here right now, but it's something like, it was a funny meme, and it just had a guy with a white coat on, like, you know, like the science or doctor coat. And then it's like, we found out all we need to do to get people to believe is say, according to a study. So that's basically all they have to do, and people just believe it as, like, you know, gospel science type thing. So there's a lot of disinformation and lies and manipulations and political agenda and biases out there. So always try to, you know, remain neutral and do your own research and weigh the pros and the cons, negatives, positives, and see who would be behind the research. You know, do they have an agenda? Do they have an ulterior motive for it to come out a certain way? So always weigh that in your decisions and use critical thinking. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Have a great day. God bless.